It's okay, just thought it's an issue.
So I'll just log in from the website, I guess.
I sent you the codes and you should have gotten to me online. And if you see Charlie in Virginia, I don't know. But I don't know if they're
So they're going to be called
Charlie.
Charlie. Okay, I'll keep
But
an eye
if I want them now, I can't.
out. Okay, I'll keep an eye out.
All right.
you have on the agenda tonight?
That's stormwater. I was just gonna say there's stormwater.
Oh, that's
discussion.
right. That's supposed to be at 6:15.
Yeah. Let's sit through that. Hear what CJ promised us. I go figure out how I do it.
I told him last week to share the video of the flooding in Death Valley. I'm like, there's practically no construction or built-up area. It's a desert, and you still have massive flooding. Like you can't always control these events. And he made a comment early on. He was like, "Are we overreacting?" Yeah, but the residents want us to look at it, react.
I think for the downtown,
For Main
the
Street.
study is really well, that's your starting point. You got to figure out what are we looking at, what are the real problems.
Yeah, I watched a YouTube video of a guy trying to drive through Death Valley in his 4Runner, which is a pretty capable vehicle.
Yeah.
He didn't have the snorkel thing on it. There was like either the road was in chunks, if there was road left, or it was covered in maybe up to a couple of feet of just.
That's a lot of water trying to drive through.
I mean, well, no, it wasn't water. I mean, it was just rock, dirt, like run, like just
Right.
almost
all
like
the debris from washing down.
almost like mudslides coming down, just covered the road in sections. So there was basically the road, and he was joking that he kept rescuing European tourists because he came across 3 or 4 groups from Italy and places that were trying to vacation. And they were in like, one was in a Nissan Altima, and they got stuck. And he was like proud, he had his winch, and he was videoing this all from his camera. So, like, yeah, these people had no idea what they were getting into. I think he drove something like 3 or more hours he was driving. I've never been to the valley. It was like he was trying to go from some part of California to Nevada. It's like it was really, really bad. I'm sure that main road's gonna take. It's kind of like when NC-12 keeps washing in the outer main. It's like,
What you drive from Lancaster to Vegas, stop wherever it is. So what you drove overnight.
right, probably not as interesting to.
No, we didn't. It was to go to Vegas. There was no detours along the way. But I think it's definitely maybe south of there. I can't remember.
California's missing from my list of places I've been. I've never been there. I need to go. So.
I was wondering if it's the military. So then did a couple of day trips around that area.
I was just reading about the tax credits. I was reading some of the article now. First thing that jumped out at me, which was, look, I know the bill was very close to not happening. They barely got the support of the guy in West Virginia. Yeah, and first thing that jumped out at me is I think the credits first came out in like 2010. The value of a $7,500 tax credit is eroded deeply. Since, like, for what people pay for electric cars, it's almost like 60 or 70 grand on a vehicle. You're almost not really. I mean, it's.
Yeah.
But it used to be a made like, okay, back then the car was like 30, 40,000. That's a significant chunk. But now, unless that state, like California has rebates, unless you can like start to stack.
Yeah.
Look, I would totally take the money. But it's not like there's a lot of $35,000 EVs rolling around. Like,
It's not going to hit anyone at that low end of your salary.
like if you could go out and buy a Honda Ford EV for 35,000, 38. I'm just making numbers up.
Yeah.
7,500 proportionally is pretty good.
Yeah.
But most of these cars, 50, 60, 70, 80,000.
Yeah.
When it was talking about next year, almost every car won't qualify. People are like, this is stupid. Said 90, I think China controls 90% of the refining right now.
For that reason.
Yeah, so the U.S. government was worried about them controlling the car market, like the Middle East oil.
Yeah.
So they're wanting to incent more mining and refining capability for all the minerals in the United States. It's going to take. It's complicated. I don't even think the EV tax credit is the biggest part of that. It's almost kind of a combined.
It's window dressing.
It is a little bit. I mean, you still buy a Nissan Leaf, but even that it has to be made in the U.S. The battery components are at least a certain percentage in the U.S. Then you only get half the tax credit. So now you're getting $37.50 or something, which is not. I mean, it's nice, but it's not. Yeah. That's like, 'cause I live in South Carolina too. We're not going to have rebate. It's not like it's the opposite of California.
West Virginia was probably able to pull power vehicles.
Oh, they do have those. Have you ever seen them?
Yeah, yeah, I've seen pictures of them. Like the Voltals or ones.
No,
Yeah.
no, no. The idiots that the coal rolling where they
Oh,
modify.
diesels.
Well, they put smokestacks on, but they actually put coal in there to make black smoke. And you can like push buttons to make the black smoke come up.
It is.
I hope it's still not a thing.
That or the Carolina squad where the back of the truck is 4 inches lower than the front is, which is illegal now. Not EV batteries.
What are you looking at?
EV battery manufacturers, I don't think I have. I was looking at somewhere to maybe invest some money. EV batteries, who are the main manufacturers? And it was China, Taiwan, too. But China's the bulk of the market. But I really want to invest my money there. So.
It's really weird. I think I just don't understand why EVs have become so politically charged. No pun intended. But like, I don't get it. It's transportation. Like, if there are people that are angry about EVs, like, for at least the time being, don't buy one.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, but it bothers people.
Well, I always felt that way about for the past 20 years. People being resistant to usable energy. They want to talk about their lives. I was like, but it is a finite resource. At some point, it may not be for 20 years, we'll run out. But 20 years ago, my thought was, well, as American, why aren't we leading this charge instead? Now China's led it because they jumped in front of us on this mistake. I thought that was a bad long-term decision. But yeah, it's all it all comes out of money and who's driving the messaging. The industry drives a lot of messaging.
Think about the fight over incandescent light bulbs. Like George Bush was president. You know, people were really upset about it. But the same people who were upset at that time are now saying our grid can't handle all the EV charging. Well, isn't it good that like this building, CJ updated this to really like think about how much money is saved every single second of every day.
Yeah.
Like your percentage of your electrical use in your house is dedicated to lighting now is dramatically dropped. Because think about like when we were kids, how many 100-watt light bulbs could you could be burning 1,500 watts an hour, 1,500 watts at a time, and now that same number is like 90.
Right.
Like what's the bulb now? Like 7 watts.
Yeah,
Like
he went from a 60 to a 7 or 75. Yeah, it's essentially 10%.
it's crazy.
It's ridiculous.
Like
Yes.
like literally, you can leave all the lights on, and it's really not going to make much difference.
Yeah.
But I mean, or the three-way light bulbs, or it's 3 different.
Yeah.
So we did that. That was. Oh no, I'm off the clock on planning tonight. I'm handling IT, so I can't answer any planning questions. Sorry. How are you?
Tough. I'm still concerned about that photo. I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Right, I looked at the plans, one with the green trees,
Yeah.
looks like I'm forward. They use the entrances just like they did in Craig.
Pull up my note.
Please.
Give me a second.
I hate to, but
No,
I was
no,
like, oh my goodness,
I'm
I
sorry I
found
didn't get it. I know you emailed again. I'll just get back to you today.
it. And I found the letter stating they can't face that way, according to. It said that to me.
So. No, this is not a touch screen.
See how they come into the back?
Oh, so you're saying these,
Those three. And that's where we are exiting. We're gonna look at the garbage cans. if
so
that's the
this
case.
was the 2012, mic here. Hold on.
So moved. For the town of Matthews for August 22nd, 2022. I'm Mayor John Higdon. I'll start with some introductions. To my left, your right, is Commissioner Renee Garner, Commissioner Larry Whitley, Mayor Pro Tem Ken McCool, Town Manager Becky Hawk, Town Attorney Charlie Buckley, Commissioner Mark Tefano, Commissioner Gina Hoover, Commissioner John Urban, our Town Clerk Lori Canapino, and our Planning Director Jay Camp. Communications Coordinator Maureen Keith is on vacation tonight. I'd like to start with a moment of reflection. I'm going to do something a little different tonight. Usually, I think every time that I've been asked, I've given a prayer, but tonight I want to reflect on something that was on my heart, and it came from a church service that I went to this Sunday at Matthews United Methodist Church, my church. And part of Pastor Paul Craig's sermon on yesterday was an encouragement for us to be kind to others, even those that we don't know. And as I reflected on this, I was reminded of some real life examples that I've become aware of. A garbage truck driver in Spokane, Washington, left the following note for the driver who took his place when he was on vacation. Make sure you wave to the kid in the window on East 36th. He's not well. Put a sticky note on the dashboard. An anonymous person who sent this note to a child in her neighborhood who had his favorite toy stolen from his front yard. She said, I saw next door someone stole your scooter. I remember when I was 13 and someone stole my bike and how sad I felt. That being said, I hope you enjoy this new green scooter. I wasn't about to let someone steal your joy. Keep your head up, little man. Two young boys asked their father to stop the truck they were riding so they could help a man in a wheelchair who was struggling to shovel his driveway during a snowstorm. The boys were ages 6 and 10, and their father said in a post on social media he was never prouder of his sons. A team of electricians worked in a house for weeks, and the young boy who lived there peppered them with questions on what they were doing and why every day, followed them around like a shadow. Sometimes he got in the way, but weeks after the job was completed, the boy received a letter in the mail that included a pay slip and some cash from the electricians and thanked him for his help during the job. There's a baker in Brighton, Massachusetts, who every day sets aside a portion of his baked goods on a free table for those who can't afford to pay. An elderly couple told an exhausted big box worker that they were going out to eat after they exited his checkout line, and they asked him, what can we bring you? Meatloaf with green beans and some sweet tea, said the teenage worker sarcastically. Imagine his surprise when 20 minutes later, the couple returned and gave the hungry worker his requested meal. And finally, I read of a stranger who paid for parking at a hospital for a frantic man that didn't have enough money to enter the parking deck. Because of this generosity, he later learned the man was able to see his dying father one last time. So in today's polarized society, it's good to still hear and see niceness and generosity towards our fellow man demonstrated in these ways. And it doesn't take a lot of money or effort to make someone's day, just a determination to treat others as we wish to be treated. So tonight, I encourage you to look for these small opportunities to be kind. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we're going to agenda item number 4, the adoption of the agenda. I'll ask the town manager if there's any additions, deletions, or movements within the agenda that can be done now.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the board, we do have 2 items tonight. The first one is some unfinished business that we were not able to discuss at the 5:30 meeting, and so that would be to receive information on stormwater issues. And the second one is to approve a revised resolution for the governor's highway safety program as a new business item. That was a resolution that this board passed previously, but we need to amend the dollar amount.
Okay, we talked briefly before the meeting about how we should do this. I think it's probably best to do it as 2 motions. So would someone like to make a motion to receive information on stormwater issues?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Garner. We will move this to item 8E. Is that okay?
Correct.
Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Like a second motion to add the approved revised resolution for Governor's Highway Safety Program as a new business item, 9G.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Urban. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, that item will be under new business 9G. So I understand that no one in our audience tonight has signed up to speak or make a public comment. But if there's anybody in the Zoom audience, they can use the Zoom's hand raise feature or raise hand feature. Or if you're on a desktop or mobile device, you can click raise hand in the webinar controls and you'll be recognized by the name listed in your Zoom window. Do we have anybody virtually that's requested to make a public comment? Mr. Camp? Okay, thank you. Move on to agenda item number 6, the advisory committee report, update from the Environmental Advisory Committee on the Lights Out program. Mr. Miller, Mr. Ross. Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for either Mr. Ross or Mr. Miller? I can go ahead and read the resolution, and then I'll entertain a motion to adopt it. Whereas Matthews strives to become a global leader in environmental sustainability, balancing economic growth with preserving our natural resources, and whereas light pollution of the airspace is a growing threat to nocturnally migrating birds, resulting in collision-induced fatalities, disrupted orientation, and suboptimal habitat selection. And whereas 536 bird fatalities were recorded by the Mecklenburg County Audubon Society volunteers in the downtown area of Charlotte over a multi-season collection period, and whereas over 100 chimney swifts not included in the aforementioned collection period were killed in Mecklenburg County in a single incident in 2019. And whereas the Charlotte area produces 384.2 watts per cubic meter or per square centimeter of light pollution. I should know that as an engineer. A statistic that helped name the Charlotte area as the worst city in the U.S. for stargazing in 2021. And whereas a Lights Out Matthews campaign would reduce light pollution, prevent avian collisions and structures of all types, and save money by way of reduced energy use and resulting carbon footprint. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Commissioners of the Town of Matthews urges all residents and business owners to help protect birds by turning off all non-essential lighting during critical bird migration periods, which is March 15th through May 30th and September 10th through November 30th annually. And 2, will implement a lights out policy for all non-essential lighting at all town building locations at all times, and especially during the stated periods of bird migration. If it be the will of this board, this will be adopted this 22nd day of August 2022. Is there any questions or comments or motions?
I have a comment, Mayor.
Okay.
This was kind of a long process. So I appreciate the work that you and your committee have put into it. For those who are watching, Debbie Foster emailed this to the town as a representative for the Audubon Society, and it came to us as board members. we weren't, I don't think many of us knew exactly what to do with it, but we liked the idea. And so we handed it to you guys and you came back with something really great from Matthews. So thank you for putting so much work and so much thought into it.
Yeah, and we've done a number of things over the years. The bee situation, wildlife habitat, we're an official wildlife habitat facility. We've done a number of things to try and make Matthews I want to use the term ecologically friendly location. So it's not only good for people, and I hear that all the time from our neighbors, but it's good for sometimes I'm not so happy with the deer who eat my garden, but, and the rabbits too. But we're trying to make everybody blend together a bit better. And in the process, there's a note there about reducing things like carbon footprint, where we can maybe make money by doing some things that help out I call them bugs and bunnies, our bugs and bunnies that occupy the same space we do. So thank you very much.
I think the residents of Matthews really appreciate that aspect of what sets Matthews apart. So thank you for your work. And on that note, I will make a motion that we adopt this resolution on reducing window bird collisions.
Okay, motion from Commissioner Garner. Do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Urban. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Move on to agenda item number 7, the consent agenda. Entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda items 7A through 7C. Commissioner Tufano.
Yes, I'd like to ask, excuse me, I'm sorry. I'd like to ask how much will be left in the surplus at the end of the year when we take this general fund amount for the, or is it just a bookkeeping change? Bookkeeping transfer?
This is a bookkeeping transfer.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items A through C3.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Tufano. All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Move on to agenda item number 8, unfinished business. 8A, consider John Street pedestrian crossing study grant application. Ms. Stujenki.
Thank you for having me tonight. I'm Dana Stujenki. For those who don't know me, I am the transportation planner here, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about John Street pedestrian crossing study grant application, and something we want to look at, which is a really important corridor, which is John Street from I-485 to NC-51. And this is the heart of downtown. And this would basically be a study of how to move pedestrians around this corridor. We have a comprehensive plan as well as a downtown plan that's happening with Jay Camp's group, the planning group that's looking at long-term vision of how the whole town's going to look in future year, but also including this corridor for that future year alignment. But this study would really focus in on pedestrians and how that movement would happen in current day configuration, like how it's configured currently, John Street, and how we can improve upon that in current day. And so basically we are wanting to apply for a reimbursement program through Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization. It's an 80-20 match. And so we have to spend all the dollars, but we get reimbursed up to all of it except for 20%. And there's 2 kinds of studies in this call for grants, or call for projects. One is a study, and then later you'll hear about one that is for projects to be built. So this is the study version. What this study would allow us to do is to get 15% level design plans in order to address pedestrian crossings, as well as looking at the cost of each of those crossings. So as well as locating those crossings along that corridor. We've seen a huge redevelopment effort along this corridor, as well as just, it's evolving, and we want to understand what we're supposed to do. And this study really allows us to have these neat little packages of information for NCDOT. This is an NCDOT road, and we need to understand all the data that needs to be associated with making these things happen. And so we're hoping to get out of the study 5, 6 little packages of crosswalks so that we can say, okay, NCDOT, you've walked through this process with us. We're ready to implement X, Y, and Z. And this would allow us to do it. Basically, the cycle would be, the study wouldn't be kicked off until spring of next year, early summer, just because of how many hoops it has to jump through. We'd have to go through the call for application, and it has to hopefully be approved by the CRTPO board, and that would happen in January. Then would have to go to the Board of Transportation, March, and then it has to be released to the division office. So that is our ask for tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. I know we discussed this in the TAC meeting that I attended this past week, and I think everybody in town is noticing a lot of people crossing John Street right now, just wherever they want to cross, particularly during farmers market, things like that. So for that reason, I would greatly support this. Also, it's always a good deal when the town gets an 80-20 match. I mean, that's money well spent. Are there any other comments or questions for Dana? Mr. Tufano, Commissioner Tufano?
Yes, probably more for Becky, maybe for Dana. This 150,000, is that payable in full by the town and then reimbursed? And if it's payable in full by the town, will it come out of the FY23 or the FY24 budget?
Sure. So it is reimbursable. So that means that we would front the cost and then seek reimbursement after the fact. So as far as which fiscal year it would fall into, I think that is going to depend on that timing. If it's early spring, it would be this current fiscal year. Potentially when in the summer it could trip into the next. But we would be looking to do a fund balance appropriation regardless of which fiscal year it falls into. And then it shows on the books as a reimbursable for the 80%.
And what is have you had experience with this particular organization before in reimbursing?
We have, yes.
And how timely are they in the reimbursement?
It's usually when we submit them, it's within 4 to 6 weeks, we get a check back. So
Okay.
we get lots of money through CRTPO and through this process. So I typically invoice quarterly, and when I invoice them, then they send a check to finance 4 to 6 weeks after that.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Whitley?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we approve John Street pedestrian crossing study application for the CRTPO 2022 fall call project with the total cost of study not to exceed $150,000.
Thank you, Commissioner Whitley. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Tufano. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Dana. You're up again. Receive information on EB 5969 North Carolina 51 side path, North Trade Street, Independence Point Parkway.
Okay, so this project is a NCDOT project. It is a multi-use path 151, basically in front of the hospital and on Novant, across Novant's campus and all the way to the corner of Independence Point Parkway. So from Trade to Independence Point Parkway. This is something that you all back in February fully funded. I'm not asking for more money. I am just asking you all, or just letting you all know that we have to fund it through a different source. So initially NCDOT said, hey, we'll pay the other 80%, just apply within basically the division office. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. That was various reasons. They decided against that. They wanted us to apply for CRTPO funding. So that Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization has this call for projects. It's highly competitive. So that's sort of the kicker here, is where division money, it was supposedly sort of more of a direct link to money. Now we're in a more competitive process. The good news is that we are doing a 50-50 match. Basically, the town is still only doing the 20%, but because NCDOT has money associated with the project and they consider the CRTPO dollars different, it's basically, it looks like on paper that the town is bringing and NCDOT is bringing 50% to this. So I think it's going to be a good candidate for this money. But it is just a different source of money. So I just wanted to make you aware that, wow, what I said to you in February, we're changing. And while I was here tonight, I figured I'd give you an update on this project.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Mr. Garner?
I don't have a question, but thank you, Dana. We talked about at the CRTPO this past time, how competitive projects are becoming. And so any sort of creativity that gets us ahead of the curve is phenomenal and puts us in a really good place. I don't, I think it's important to recognize that you're putting a lot of thought into this.
I appreciate that. And they're saying now they only require a 20% match, but most projects now are coming in with a 30% match. And that's something we need to be aware of when we submit other projects. The planning dollars, the 80-20 that we did for the planning study, they're not as competitive. That's not as hard to get those dollars, but the construction dollars are becoming much more competitive. So if I come back at some point with a 30-70, you'll know why. So thank you.
Yeah, just to add on to that, at the last CRTPO meeting, when Jennifer Stafford was giving a talk about these grants, she mentioned, somebody asked, what's the secret sauce to get them approved? And she said, put more town money than 20%, because everybody puts 20%, that's the bare minimum. If you put 30%, it sometimes can move you up in the priority list and get these projects done. This is another really important one. I know since I've been in Matthews, there's been at least one fatality at that intersection there in front of the hospital. So this would be a great benefit to the town and maybe increase safety as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Move on to item 8C, consider town investment strategies. Ms. Falk.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the board. As you will recall, on August the 8th, we began this discussion about investment strategies, and staff was asked to go back and obtain some additional information. So we went back to 3+1 cash vest as recommended. And Jay, if you can go down to like slide 4. So in your packet were 5 references that were provided to us by 3+1 cash vest, showing different towns that have been doing business with them for at least 5 years. And to kind of walk through some of this, you can see at the top, it talks about the original amount of fixed income allocation that they had, or idle funds that they were investing prior to going with 3+1 cash vest. And then the second line is what they're currently investing with them. And then they go down to talk about the original fixed income, the percentages of those allocations. So they up the percentage of idle funds that they were investing by 30%. Then the next section is original average rate initially on that original $17.3 million, and then the initial benchmark that they had in BPS or basis points. So the 52 would be 0.52%, and the 146 will be 1.46%. So as you see, originally they were performing below their benchmark by 0.94%. And now the last grouping the groupings are the same for each town that they list. The last grouping shows what the average rate is now and their current benchmark and how they are performing. So they are currently doing better than their benchmark by 0.13%. However, if you look at between the being below by 0.94, they have increased their average earnings by 1.07% in relation to the benchmarks that they set for themselves. Because they were a negative 94 and now they're a positive 13. Does that make sense? Yes, sir. Commissioner Tufano.
Yes, when I was looking at this, I didn't quite understand what initial benchmark rate. Who sets that? Was that Cash Vest that set that?
No, it was the town.
So that's what they wanted to get as an investment? Is that what that means? That was their goal?
That was their goal.
So the average rate earned initially, let's just take Aurora, for instance, was 15 basis points, which is 0.15%. But their goal was 0.53%. And they did not meet their goal?
No.
Okay.
And then when they began using CashVest, their goal, well, they adjusted, I guess they had adjusted their benchmark to 35, and now their average rate earnings is 42.
So they got an additional 0.07%.
Well, above their benchmark.
Above their benchmark, right. Okay, thank you. So benchmark was set by the town, not by 3+1.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Teresa, do you have any of these basis points converted to dollars? No, it's a simple multiplication, but I'd just be curious. I mean, are they covering their $9,900?
I did not do that math, but it is my understanding from speaking with CashVest that all of these people are exceeding their, and because the basis of the fee from CashVest is based on their current year general fund budget.
Do they charge the same amount for everyone regardless of the amount of money they're investing?
No, they charge based on the amount of money in your general fund budget. So it's like a 0 to 35 million, I think it is the 9,900. And then if you're in a 35 million to whatever the next step is, it steps up a little bit higher. Because obviously, I mean, with a budget that is that much higher, you tend to have a higher amount of idle funds available.
Mr. Tufano?
Yes, so when CashVest or 3+1, CashVest is really the brand name of the product and 3+1 is the company. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So
correct.
when 3+1 gives you a recommendation on which instruments to buy, well, I'll just take Matthews, for instance. If we decide to go with them, you would have to go out and buy those yourself, or does 3+1 provide a service to buy them for you?
No, sir. And they're not recommending, I guess, necessarily particular items to buy. They are showing you the different institute or the place, the institutions and or whether it's a banking institution or like the trust that is currently investing and earning at a higher rate than, say, you know, if Wells Fargo or Bank of America was products of comparable portfolios were earning better than the trust, then, you know, they would give us all those options and we would decide whether we wanted to go with Bank of America, Wells Fargo, or the trust. But then the institutions would still be doing the purchasing within the framework of the North Carolina statutes.
One other question. And so just for the public's knowledge, state statute, I think, forgive me if I get it wrong, I believe it's 159-30, states what we can invest in and what we can't.
Correct.
Right. So CashVest or 3+1 would be bringing to us commodities or financial instruments that meet that state statute requirement.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Town manager, do you have a comment?
No.
Okay, your hand was hovering over your mic.
No,
I didn't know.
You're just waiting to jump in if necessary, but.
Mr. Gar?
I have been, following along this. This is not my wheelhouse, obviously, and so I've been trying to frame it in ways that I understand in small bites, and at the same time apprehensive to be an armchair expert by using the internet to find ways to understand this, right? So, and so I've been trying to find, what I'm saying is I've been trying to find ways to make this make sense to me. And from my point as sitting on the board and trusting you as an expert in what you do and how I understand what my place in this is that's where I've been looking for answers. And I found something on the School of Government website, which I trust, to no end. Is a comment that said trading should be left to the professionals and the investment officers so that the investment officer is insulated from public attacks over the wisdom of specific strategies. The public is charged with the care of public funds and not earning excess in return. And that to me says, I'm not here to say what is the best organization to go with. As a board, I think our job is to make sure that what we are doing is making a wise decision that keeps the town and the town employees and the board as a whole insulated from any sort of accusations that can be thrown our way. And I think that's why, since the beginning, that sort of answers my question as to why I've been comfortable with this 3+1 versus going to individual banks. I bank at Wells Fargo. I don't want anybody saying that I'm, trying to throw business their way because whatever. I mean, my bank account is, not going to benefit from anybody at this point unless you've got lots of prayers for me. But but I do. I appreciate the work that you've done in finding this option for the town. At the same time, I kind of wonder, I've seen what other cities do, and I'm sure you're all tired of hearing me say that this town and that town do this. A policy on investment options seems to be a common document among towns, and I would like to see us move in that direction, because I kind of wonder, is this putting the cart before the horse? We're finding an answer to something we didn't know was a question. But I also think, and if I understand correctly, they can be done at the same time. And I think maybe to me, that's a comfortable solution for this as we go forward.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that, Commissioner Garner. And we do appreciate the example that you provided from the city of Durham, which Teresa and I were looking at today. And we thought that it provided a great framework for us to borrow liberally from. So what we talked about was if the board decides to take action tonight on Cash Fest, it's certainly your prerogative. And regardless of that action, we would intend to move forward with an investment policy that does provide a framework for staff to follow. If we do move forward with Cash Fest this evening, it will take a bit of time to get it up and running. And so we think that there would be sufficient time to be able to bring that framework back that staff would then be working from as it made the decisions based on the information that would then be provided by Cash Fest for us to make informed decisions with the information from Cash Fest as the data and then the policy as the guide.
Mr. Tufano.
Yeah, Teresa, thank you. One, I'd like to readdress the question of who goes out and actually buys the securities. I don't think we answered that. So in other words, when Cash Fest says BB&T's got some product there or some CD or whatever the case may be, and then you've got another product over here or whatever, and you decide which ones you want, is it the town itself goes out and actually executes the transaction, correct? Or does Cash Fest do that for you and charge you a fee?
No, Cash Fest does. We would be the ones who, like, say, if we identified that we wanted to put a certain amount of money in a CD and BB&T, who had the best rate with the terms that we were comfortable with, then we would contact that bank and make that transaction ourselves.
Okay. Just a recommendation where I think we might be able to save you some time and effort is, I think we put a lot of money in PNC, don't we? We transfer our monthly, every time we want to pay our checks and do everything, we take it out of the general fund, put it into PNC. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that's quite a bit of money every month. That's $2 or $3 million, I believe. Right?
Yes, sir.
I would ask you to consider going to PNC and saying, look, we're giving you $2 or $3 million of our money every month. We don't want to pay any bank fees anymore. We don't want to pay that $40,000-$50,000 a year or whatever it is on the budget line. And also, how about doing these transactions for us as well? And so I'm just putting that out there as a possible bargaining tool for you to make it easier for yourself to just call this your one bank that you do give considerable funds to and ask them to perform these services for you. And also get rid of those bank fees for $2 million a month. I'm surprised they haven't done that already.
Yeah, PNC to this point in conversations that we have had with them have not shown a lot of interest in making any concessions on the amount of fees and they don't, they don't move their ECR rate with the interest rate. So they decide internally when they want to give us more credit for the amount of money that we have. I mean, not saying it's not an option to go back to them, but I have not had great feelings or great warmth from them to this point.
Have you made them aware that there's 8 other banks in town?
Well, I'm sure they are aware of that, but most time when you start talking about different things, most banks will give, but PNC, well, as you will see from another item I have on the agenda tonight, they're not as eager as some other banks, maybe potentially too. But that's a whole other discussion about putting the whole banking thing out for an RFP, which is on the radar, and we are looking into that.
I think that would be an excellent move. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I think this whole discussion item has been brought up over many years and several boards. But I think we're taking good incremental steps in the right direction to try to get more safe return on our investment for our people that give us their tax money to run the town. So I think this is a good first step. Any incremental improvement we can make, because honestly, some of the returns we've had in years past were just, if I was the banker, I'd have to blush to present that to people, just ridiculous. So, we're going to hold your millions of dollars. Here's your $2.82 for the last 6 months of interest or whatever. So this is a good step. I support this, and I would welcome any motions regarding signing a contract or authorizing the town manager to sign a contract with CashVest.
I'd like to make a motion to endorse the staff to recommend the entering professional service agreement with 3+1 CashVest and approve the responding budget amendment. $9,900.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Whitley, second by Mayor Pro Tem McCool. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Passes 6-1 with Commissioner Tefano in opposition.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 8D, consider the contract for the town attorney. The town attorney's contract is on our website. Is that correct? I know, but is it? So yeah, because it's on the agenda, so it's obviously on the website. So this is to extend Mr. Buckley's contract through June 30th, 2023. Does represent a very nominal pay increase of $20 per hour. Entertain a motion or any discussion on this item.
I'll make a motion that we approve the contract that is in the agenda packet.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Urban. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that passes 5-2 with Commissioner Hoover and Commissioner Tefano in opposition. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 8E, which was receive information on stormwater issues. Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you all. Hopefully this will be a little more lively than the previous discussions. I'll have some pictures and things like that.
All right.
Yeah, no floods though. You have to watch an advertisement for about a minute before they'll bring up any news videos, so I couldn't bring that up.
It's a new one. All right, thank you. Matthew Stormwater Program. All right. That's stormwater. So just to give you some background of stormwater in North Carolina. And boy, I can't see my notes. I didn't think that through. Okay. So there are several different ways of and Charlie could explain this better, of viewing stormwater depending on where in the nation you live. Yeah, maybe I can see it. All right, can you hear me okay? All right, sorry about that. Are you okay if I sit here for the dais? Thanks. That's all right. So one is called the civil law rule, which basically obligates the lower property to accept the water from the land above it. It's a pretty tight rule and wasn't deemed to be, I guess, realistic in North Carolina. So through court cases and case law, North Carolina has adopted what's called a reasonable use rule. Basically says that you can change the water coming from your property and put it on your downstream property as long as you don't severely change how that water acts. So as long as you don't do something that is considered harmful interference, you're allowed to change that water and put it on somebody else's property. The DOT has taken that to mean basically that they don't have to do anything outside of their right of way. They build the roads, they build their ditches. Once the water leaves that point, then it's not their responsibility. So that's what DOT does. Charlotte has kind of the opposite thing. If there is a drop of public water that goes into any sort of system and it impacts your property, you are eligible for receiving funds from them. That works so well that they had to halt their program for anything that wasn't critical because they had a backlog of several years of projects. What we've done in Matthews is somewhere in between. We've said that we are willing to help you out as long as there's some criteria that are met. A lot of it being that at least 25% of that water comes from public roads, from our roads. We adopted that in 2022, June 13th of this year. But there are cases where our stormwater policy does not cover that. Well, I'll get to that in a second. So this is the process that we have right now with our stormwater program. We have a contract with Mecklenburg County and their 311 system to take in calls from us and to inspect them. So the procedure is that somebody here, if they have a stormwater issue, they call Mecklenburg County, they call 311. They said, I have a stormwater issue in Matthews. They will document that. They will put that in their database. That way in future years, we can go back and see the history of that location or locations around it. They have an inspector that goes out. They do a site visit, talk to the person, see what's happening, document that, and determine whether that qualifies under our policy. They have a copy of our policy. They go through it and see whether it qualifies in their opinion. They then review it with town staff, what their opinion is. We either concur or sometimes talk through it with them if we have a differing opinion till we do what we think is right, truthfully. And then we send the reply to the rest of it, whether that's fixing their issue or telling them, I'm sorry, it's something that we can't help you with. Now, things that we don't qualify typically are yard flooding. Typically, it's not something that impacts the structure. Structures we typically do, but just flooding of the yard is not something that we typically do. Like I said, if the water's coming from a neighbor's yard, that's not something that we handle. That's between property owners. That doesn't have public water in it. Unless it comes from an upstream street, goes over that property and hits theirs, then we would. Issues of their own, caused by something that they did. So if they grade their property and now it's causing issues, we don't go back there and repair that. We don't do general maintenance. They're responsible for trimming their dishes, those sorts of things. Or standing water in the ditch line that stands for less than 72 hours. That 72 hours is basically how long it takes for mosquitoes to start. So the water's gone within 72 hours. You don't have a mosquito issue. The water goes into the ground. We don't worry about it. If it stands longer than that, then we will go out there and do it. And one more thing, flooding due to severe storm weather events. So the drainage system in Matthews, when it's built, is built according to the Mecklenburg County Stormwater Design Manual. And I'll go through that in just a second, kind of what that is. Just a brief thing, we get roughly 41.63 inches per year. That's actually, I think, more than Portland. It's just we receive them in small bursts, whereas the Northeast, Pacific Northwest, I'm sorry, typically has it over extended periods of time. Since 1878, the largest amount of rain in one day in Charlotte area was 6.88 inches, and that was in 1997. So this is the designs at the top are what we design our stormwater system for. Thoroughfares, which are the major roads, the drainage system beside the road is for 10-year storm, and cross drains are for 50-year storm. Minor roadways, it's a 10-year storm for ditches and pipes along the road, and then 25 years for crossing drains. And the interesting thing, I hope this works. Oh, that's interesting. So there are many ways you can actually meet those thresholds. So if this is the 10-year storm, which is what the side ditches and pipes do, you can exceed it if you have more than 0.6 of an inch in 5 minutes, or 97/100ths of an inch in 10 minutes. So there's lots of ways all the way up to the 24-hour storm, which is what this is. I kind of hinted to it a little bit, but we've been seeing a lot more prevalence of larger storms over the past several years. When I came out of college, that 7.30 there for the 100-year 24-hour storm was lower. So that changes, that's updated based on how frequently we get storms. But when you have records going back to the 1800s, it takes a lot of large events for that to go up very substantially. Any questions so far? July 15th, 2014, we had a really large storm. So this is Mecklenburg County. Oops, sorry, wrong button. This is Mecklenburg County. Right where that red dot is, that's Matthews. And that's where the largest rainfall was. That was roughly 5 inches in a day. So if you remember back with that chart, in one day, 5 inches, so that's 4.90 there. So that's a 10-year storm. And we did have some flooding from that, some localized flooding. Pastor Whitley, I think you may remember that. This was in 2018. This was with a hurricane. So same sort of scale, except that red dot there means more than 11 inches of rain. So if you remember, the previous record was around 6 inches of rain. That was 11 inches of rain we had here in less than 24 hours. So that's a tremendous amount of rain. Those are things that our storm system cannot handle. And frankly, we can't afford to upgrade our system to handle that. That's why we have those thresholds in there for what we do and what we don't do. Unfortunately, we don't have those pretty pictures for the last big rain event, so I have to go to graphs. This is a chart of the rain over several days in Matthews in July. So what you see is a series of the vertical lines there are a series of rain events where you had a lot of rain over a very short period of time. And then that last one is this here. So you can see how vertical that line is. That means we got, 2 inches of rain over a very short period of time. So if you remember that chart, this is a table that we did with the rain data that was gathered from the elementary school, Matthews Elementary. So anything in blue was a 2-year storm in that period of time. So on the 8th, which was Friday, we had a couple 2-year events. On Saturday, we had several 2-year events, several 10-year events, several 25-year events, and one 100-year event, which we were supposed to call the 1% event. So we're continuing to have these events. Unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do about that much rain in that short period of time. What we can do is to help people that have continued flooding with the smaller events, the events that our stormwater system should be able to handle. And that's why later on the agenda, we're bringing you an item for Old Town Matthews, which has had flooding over several years with much smaller events. So that's really all I have for you. You have questions?
Commissioner Tofano?
Yeah, no, these are infrastructure questions, CJ. On town roads, if you have a storm sewer, who owns the piping underneath? Is that also the towns?
Yeah, so if it's a town road, then we're responsible for the infrastructure underneath it.
And that it eventually finds its way into a county system, or?
Yeah, once there is more than a square mile of land feeding into a stream, then the county's responsible for it. Before that point, we're responsible for streams.
And so in other words, what I'm trying to get at, I think, is where does it all end up? Does it end up at I know there's multiple places, obviously, that it ends up, but where it ends up, is that a county facility or a county creek or a greenway sort of thing?
So unlike, say, sanitary sewer, stormwater is not treated. So it comes from our roads, goes through pipe systems to streams, and then to tributaries, then to rivers and the ocean.
Okay. Now, specifically Main Street, and what is the stormwater system on Main Street?
That's state maintained.
I'm sorry?
NCDOT maintained. I'm sorry, Main Street. Sorry, thinking the wrong road.
Yep.
Yes, that's our road. That's the town's road.
And do we have a stormwater system in place on Main Street?
Yeah, there's a series. So stormwater systems can be everything from the swale next to the road, the ditch, to pipes that go underneath the road and next to the road. There is a system there. And later on the agenda, there's an item that's going to talk about having a consultant come in and look at the system as a whole in that area.
Because I was actually looking for, the actual on the road by the curb. There is no curb, but I mean, to actually see a stormwater grate, and I didn't see any.
Right. So open ditches are considered part of the stormwater system,
Mm.
and they're actually many times more effective than pipes. They typically hold more than a pipe would. So if you have a 3-foot wide ditch, it would take maybe a 5-foot pipe to handle that same amount of water. It also cleans the water with the filtration from the grass, the vegetation. It also allows for infiltration that stormwater pipes do not.
No, thanks for taking the time to explain all that.
Sure.
So this main flooding that was on Main Street during that big storm, it seemed like it was coming off of the construction site on Ames. Does the town have any control over that at all?
We do, to a point. So there's some things to take into consideration. When you have, and you'll hear this a lot from the county, turbid water, basically means that there is sediment in the water. It takes a very little amount of clay for it to turn everything orange.
Mm-hmm.
So even if just a very little came off and got into the water, that may not be an issue. Other things to take into consideration is their erosion control measures. As long as they have them up to the standard that they're supposed to put them, if that is overcome because of the size of the storm, then they're not responsible for it.
Mm.
The county was basically told by the state, because of the size of the storm, that unless we could show dirt, like clumps of dirt on a property next to where it's coming from, we could not do anything about it. We could not find them. We could not hold them responsible.
I see. And that's controlled by our code enforcement officer?
No, the county does erosion control for us. So when we have an issue with erosion control, we call the county. It's part of the same policy or the same agreement we have with them. And they go out and they inspect it and they determine whether it's an issue or not.
And thank you for going into such detail. I'm asking these questions. Sure. Actually, there's been a lot of the constituents in that area that wanted me to ask these questions to get answers. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Right.
Commissioner Urban.
So CJ, we're not going to solve all these problems, but there are probably 8 to 10 steps in terms of commercial and residential development, that we could take small incremental steps that would help begin the conversation. Is that something staff has already been looking at, or does the board need to sort of direct you to come back with like some recommendations?
So, yeah, I would prefer to have some direction, because there are, what we're talking about right now is quantity, or what I was talking about. Mr. Tefano is talking about is quality, and they're two kind of separate things. So if you're worried more about the quantity and how we handle that, that's one discussion, and that gets very expensive very quickly. If we're talking about quality, that's a different discussion. That's fairly easy to do incrementally, like what you were saying.
Correct. Well, what I would be interested in is a good, better, and best list of both scenarios, kind of in order of priority from that standpoint, because there's probably some low-hanging fruit that could be done very, very quickly. For example, silt fencing on a construction site, doubling it up or something like that. And
Right.
I'm sure. So I'd like to sort of see those things that we could look at incremental changes, because obviously we have to be sensitive to development costs and things of that nature, but there are probably some things that come right out of the box that make sense, that in the long run will help. We're not going to solve every problem, but would help.
Right.
CJ, you talked about the quantity of what constitutes a 2 or 5 or 10, 2,500 year event. Have there been associated upgrades with the size of piping required to handle that?
So for new projects, yes, they're required to handle the new storms that are there. So every time a new project comes in, they use the design manual, which has those
The
numbers in
engineer would
there.
have to sign off that they can handle this.
Correct.
Okay, I got you. Thank you. Are there any other questions for CJ? So really good explanation. First time I can remember going in this much detail since I've been sitting on the dais. So thank you. It's very informative.
You're welcome. If you want to be bored again, let me know.
Oh,
Be
that
happy
was
to come
great.
back.
All right, let's go on to new business. Item 9A, consider mast arms on Greylock Ridge Road. Ms. Stujenki, you're up again. You're a popular guest this evening.
Okay, thank you all for listening to this final topic from me, which is discussing different kinds of signal poles for Greylock Ridge. And I just want to remind you about this project in particular. This is the Greylock Ridge Extension Project, HL 0025. And you all approved this project back in 2020. This is through CRTPO, once again, the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization. And this project, all in all, is about a $7 million project. The mayor and I worked really closely with CRTPO, so we didn't have to have a match. So typically we have a 20-80 match on these projects. This would have been 1.4 million or so, and we have zero match on this one, which is great. As this project is developing, we have things that we have to deal with in terms of just amenities in the project. And we could have the intersection of John Street and Greylock Ridge have brown poles. And so why don't you pull up, Jay, would you mind going to the bottom? And there's pictures, and I'll walk through it with everyone. So there are 3 kinds of signal poles. At least it's not very late at night, so I can talk about this and no one's going to sleep through my signal pole discussion. But so we've got the brown wooden poles, and these are free with the project. And you can see.
As they should be.
Okay, let's see if the pointer
They should
works.
pay us to take those.
Okay, is this the very top button? Okay, great. So this is the wooden pole, and you can see here, these are called guy wires. And so these help support the pole. And basically it's not very aesthetically pleasing. And this is the base model, if you will. And this will cost NCDOT about $60,000. And we're not responsible for it, but that's what the cost for the intersection is. So let's go to the next pole. So this is strain pole. Oh, so this pole is a metal pole. This one is silver, the one that's pictured, but you can get it powdered coated into different colors. This has a wire that spans across and will have the dangling signal heads, as well as this is a nameplate of whatever road you're going. They roll around in the wind. It looks like a cloudy day, and you can see they're sort of just hanging out there. And it's an upgrade. This is more expensive, and this is about $100,000, and that would be to our cost. $100,000 for strain poles that we would have to pay. Again, they cost about $160,000, but they subtract the $60,000 from it that the standard wood poles would have. And this is, they consider an upgrade from those wooden poles. And then let's go down to the mast arms. Okay, so this is Trade Street, and this is the mast arm. So you've got the pole here, and then you have a span pole here, and you can see that the lights or the signals are attached as well as the sign. There's a lot less visual clutter, and it's a much more urban design. And so the reason I'm bringing this to you all is I had a discussion with Jay Camp and Susan and Becky, and we sort of all talked about what we think would be the best treatment for this particular intersection on Greylock Ridge and John Street. And I strongly believe that the mast arm, while it is the most expensive option at $190, is really well worth it in terms of visual aesthetics and helping communicate to the public that you're entering into a different space. So, you know, picture, if you will, getting off of 485, you're traveling at 70 miles an hour, you go onto John Street, and there's going to be widening. This intersection is going to be the full widened intersection. And then there's going to be, we hope, or if there are mast arms there is a signal to the traveling public that there's something different here, that there is a structure there. And that's going to help indicate to them that we're changing sort of the way we, the land use patterns, if you will. And the same thing with coming, if you're not on 485 and you're coming off of John Street, you have to remember John Street's being widened, and that design speed on John Street is 50 miles an hour. And they're going to come underneath the bridge, you know, underneath the interstate, and they're going to think that they're, you know, clean sailing into John Street, blowing through blowing through our downtown, and then going on to Charlotte. And so we want to do as much as we can to indicate to those in the traveling public that there is something different going on here. And that is, you know, our study for the crosswalks, you know, all of it is to signal people that this is different. So that is my, you know, sort of our ask to you all. I'm happy to answer questions about this.
I've got a question that is very tangential to the conversation at large here, but how much is an average traffic signal weigh? Just out of curiosity, do you know?
Oh, I have no, if I get one. I could research it for you, but I don't know.
I'm just curious. It's interesting how these things are hanging off wires or a mast arm, and the moment arm there is pretty incredible. They're heavy.
And I will say that these have to be set back further. One of the reasons why we need to know, we would like to know now, is because the design changes slightly depending on the wooden poles, which are lighter and can be more in, or can be closer in to the intersection, and the mast arms and the metal poles have to be further out. So we have enough right away for both, but they want to understand, NCDOT wants to understand what our preference is.
And the strain poles would have basically a box of wires going around the whole intersection. Is that correct?
Yes, there are wires all around there, and just have the poles. So.
Commissioner Tufano.
Yeah, just as a.
Can't hear you. Oh,
30 to 50 pounds.
30 to 50 pounds?
32.
Oh, for the weight of the signal. Is that what
30
you're
to 50
asking?
pounds. So my next cocktail party, I can drop that bit of knowledge and impress people. Thank you. Mr. Tufano.
Yes, thank you. So I'm totally in favor of the mast arm approach. So I'm going to ask a question that has nothing to do with the mast arm. All right.
Awesome.
So is this an NCDOT requirement that we put a traffic light there?
Yes. Well, that is the Greylock Bridge we're putting up. Yes, the traffic light is warranted there.
But I mean, since that's a state road, was that our choice or their edict, or how did that work out?
They look at traffic patterns, and yes, it is, NCDOT is requiring a traffic signal there.
Okay.
And we want a traffic signal there. So.
Yeah. I'm looking at future plans along John Street, right near 485.
Right.
And there appears to be, correct me if I'm wrong, but appears to be maybe it'll end up being 3 or 4 traffic lights within less than a half a mile on both sides of 485. Not meant for this conversation, but I really would like to know what the plans are with the upcoming rezonings that are going on and how these traffic lights are going to affect that horrible traffic that comes in from Stallings. I mean, it's going to be an absolute zoo there. So, and I see Susan shaking her head. So I would like to know that, that in the next year or 2 years, based on the NJ as well, on the construction requests that are coming up in that area, what impacts that's going to have on that traffic. It's bad enough already, but adding 3 or 4 traffic lights is going to be horrendous.
And we do, with those big developments, we do require traffic impact analysis that, answers lots of questions and goes into detail analysis for the different, depending on which property is being developed and how big the developments are.
And when does this, when would this mast arm be scheduled to be constructed?
With the project, which would be 2024, when the project opens.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Urban.
So since we tangentially have a series of actually one major rezoning in that location, wouldn't it be appropriate to sort of have conversations with the developer and the fact that what we're talking about is aiding them from this standpoint, and there should be skin in the game in this conversation?
I'm going to let Jay talk about that, if you will, Jay.
I think that coming from the bias, I think that's a reasonable question.
No, there's coming from the dais right now. I mean, that's a significant rezoning taking place there, probably upwards of $150 million plus. And they want to be right there at the gateway. I think that conversation needs to be had.
Good point. Don't disagree. I struggled with this one a bit because in particular, when I tell our constituents that we're fiscally conservative on this board, and yet we're willing to pay, a significant increase for what's essentially a traffic light intersection. It's difficult to justify, but I think in this case, two things. One thing that I don't think I realized the other night at our meeting was that the 60,000 comes off the 250, so we're down to 190. So that's a little bit less. Also, Susan and Dana and I and some other members of TAC discussed that this is essentially a gateway to Matthews, and that there's probably going to be a lot of other really nice things at this intersection. And so we for sure, I don't think want that ugly wooden poles there, but I think I can wrap my head around doing it, here, just because it's a gateway intersection. It's the welcome to our community, and it's not significantly more in the long run than even a strain pole, which would cost us over $100,000. So it's a difficult decision, but I think I could support it just because of how important this intersection is. Commissioner Tufano.
Actually, thank you for that. Was a good segue into my question. What is the life expectancy of the mast arm versus the standard wooden pole?
Apologize. I don't know if you, Susan, can shed light on that.
We're asking all kinds of good detailed technical questions.
Yeah, what an interesting question. I can't think in my 25-year career I've ever heard of a municipality having to replace a mast arm signalized intersection. We might need some painting on it, but I mean, think about the mast arms we have here at Trade. CJ, have we ever done any maintenance on that? Has DOT ever come out and painted? So there's very little maintenance on mast arms. The coating is powder coated. It's a very advanced technology to keep that color on there. And we would also do that for the strain pole option too, where it would be powder coated black. So it's a really durable surface so that you don't have to repaint it like the street light poles. Those are kind of turning gray downtown. So hardly any maintenance. Thanks.
Unless somebody runs into one. Commissioner Hoover.
Okay, I'm not quite sure how to ask this. My concern is I do like the mast arm, but I'm asking myself, is this really the right time? Because I think you said it was 2024.
Correct.
And with the widening of John Street coming in 2030 and right of ways coming in 2028. What's going on?
It's a good question. And I'll explain that and clarify it. So when the mast arm goes in 2024, that is the full built intersection. There will be no more widening at that location. So that's the full design. So once we put the mast arms in 2024, that section of road is considered widened and done.
Okay, because that's what I was kind of.
So the 2028 would be from that intersection on into Trade Street.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
you're welcome.
And it's my hope that's never widened.
That's fine.
Or moved into multiple lanes.
And I would, oh, okay.
Commissioner Garner?
Kind of touched on this just a second ago, but what's the, I don't know if this is the right term, but impact rating on these poles?
Impact rating.
I guess
What do you mean by
a
that?
car takes out a wooden pole versus a car trying to take out a metal pole.
I would just say that when you design for this, a wooden pole can be closer into the intersection than the mast arm has to be further out from the intersection. So I can find that out for you, but I'm not sure unless Susan knows it off the top of her head.
So the signal poles are designed as breakaways. So there's bolts on the bottom to help with that crash analysis. So the poles themselves are designed, like the mayor pointed out, that's a long arm, there's torque, there's wind. So it's all engineered to have a lessen the impact of any errant vehicle that might strike the pole. Sometimes you've seen mast arms on the ground. We're not going for that, but I mean, we're going for that, the bolts there are designed as a cut point. And same with, the wood poles too. I mean, they're not really breakaway, but you've seen them splinter and break up.
And my point in that is maybe more for the public than for the board, because it sounds like we all have a general direction that we're going in, and maybe I'm wrong with that too. But last year at 1 o'clock in the morning, I was going home from work on Independence coming from Indian Trail. A transformer blew and the wires fell from the lines above Independence. I sat there from 1 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the morning, stuck on Independence. So when we're thinking about the future of Matthews and whether we want wires over the road, especially at an interstate, that comes to mind. Like the potential for wires falling on the road is far more dramatic than you would ever imagine.
Commissioner Whitley?
Dana, this intersection, does it take in consideration that at some point we're going to run the road from John Street over to Charles Street too?
I'm not sure if I understand the
I think
question.
that's pretty much what John Urban was speaking about, the development. But there is a plan that we run the road from there over to John Street. Is that correct?
Right. So
what my question was, when you were telling Gina that it's a design out, where does that play with the on that street, the traffic that's coming from Charles Street into East John Street?
Are you asking about the intersections at Tanktown and Charles Street? So they're not under signal control. So they wouldn't have mast arms. I'm not sure.
But they will when they come down to John Street, wouldn't they?
Commissioner Whitley, this project is associated with Graylock Ridge Road extension that connects John Street to Charles Street. So this signal will go in when that leg is completed in 2024. This is part of that whole project.
All right, so there's funding already for that, or do we have to come back and put another?
That's the bonus allocation project. And so we started that project, the state took it over. And so far we have zero contribution towards that because there's no match, right? We got that project, that roadway it's all DOT funded. Now there might be some add-ons that would increase our costs. This is one of those add-ons where we want to upgrade as part of that roadway project. We want to upgrade the signal from the wood poles to the mast arm. So this would be our first cost for that entire roadway project would be this 190.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion and or motions?
I move to approve the $190,000 for mast arms at the intersection of Graylock Ridge Road and East John Street.
Thank you, Commissioner Tafano. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Garner. Any further discussion? Commissioner Urban.
I guess the only question would be is, in some respects, I'd rather hold this up to have some conversations with zoning folks, the zoning petitioners, but if the board as a whole is understandable that we have some projects along there, we go back to that particular petitioner and see how much skin in the game they're willing to look at. I'm just wondering from the standpoint of, well, you're already funding it. Why do I need to put any more money into it? But I think we need to have that conversation with that petitioner.
The other point to that is there's a trail through there as well. That's the funding is up.
That's correct.
Up for debate. All right, we have a motion from Commissioner Tofano, a second by who seconded that? Commissioner Garner. All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Let's go on to item 9B, receive the monthly budget report from Ms. Folk.
Good evening again. Okay, so this budget report kind of looks at 2 months. The main focus being on the preliminary figures for June of 2022, which ended FY22. Again, this was a unique year in many ways. However, you will notice we did very well with our revenues, which is awesome. Ad valorem tax were 7.24% higher year over year compared to last year. And the local option sales tax, you will see we were at 115.63% of budget, but we are 28.83% higher year over year for local option sales tax, which is amazing. Permits and fees were 131% of budget. However, we were 13.5% year over year higher. Occupancy tax, we were at 164% of budget, which is 40.34% higher year over year. And rental car taxes, 20.99% year over year. So we did very well in most of the key revenues. And then we also stayed on course with our conservative spending and making sure we watched everything as we weren't sure. The pandemic was up and down. It was kind of a roller coaster ride through much of FY22. So we were able to keep overall spending rates for the general fund at 82.33% and 56.66% for the tourism fund, which leaves us right now looking at a preliminary revenues exceeding expenditures by $6.2 million. Of course, as you know, $4.44 million of that is ARPA funds. But even when you back that out, we are still in a very good position going into FY23. And a very good position as far as our unassigned fund balance available for use in the future. Does anyone do you have any questions about any of that? And we have received the second tranche of the ARPA funds in August.
I have a question, Teresa, with regards to the rental car tax. Is that generated only from cars that are rented in Matthews, or is there some kind of formula where that money is distributed throughout the county, or what?
I think it is a formula with the county.
So I'm not aware of how many
Right.
places we even have in town that rent cars.
Right.
Not a lot. So. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Urban?
So Teresa, is, in your opinion, is this an anomaly? Or when you get into the next budget cycle, which you're already thinking about, do you pull back from that? Because we just talked about fuel costs and things like that, upsetting the apple cart. And the fact is that, for example, the only reason that rental car tax is 122.7% is that 2 years ago, I rented a car for a week for $500. This year it's $1,200.
Correct.
So what's your prognostication at this stage?
That's a very good question, which there's been a lot of discussion nationally, discussion locally on listservs about, can we really sustain this continued sales tax growth and occupancy tax growth? And, I don't see it in, infinitely just, going, especially with, interest rates are now starting to rise, which helps us as an entity on our investment earnings, because as interest rates go up, we earn more money. But at the same time, then that puts a damper on consumers as things cost them more money and their ability to borrow money is more limited. I think in the current fiscal year that we're in now, we will continue to see some growth, just because people are still, things are still moving forward. There is still growth in jobs. There is still very low unemployment. Beyond FY23 is where we start, and we have already started having conversations and looking at, how does this look, if we're still in an inflationary period, or how does this look if some other, tragic thing happens and, causes.
So I guess my follow-up is that leading indicators and lagging indicators, problem is, are there telltale signs that you see, or would you be able to see that sort of forecast to you that maybe we need to be being a little bit more conservative with our forecasting?
Not at this time. Like I said, the forecasting we did for this current year, obviously we did not budget for a 30%, increase continuing to go forward with sales tax. So we were conservative in that point, and conservative when looking at the expenditure, as well, making sure that we're not trying to, that we don't put ourselves in a situation where we have to have this level of continued growth. If that makes it, we can, draw on. And each year though, as we look at it, when we start, and of course, looking at FY24 is going to be very interesting because of the revow and all that took place in the heyday of, the market increasing. So we will have a few years of, that added growth, and hopefully with a 4-year cycle, everything else will cycle its way out and we will still continue to grow beyond this next 4-year cycle. But we are looking, and as you know, you've seen, the forecasting that the town manager has done to look beyond, because you can't just look at the next 12 months. You've got to look beyond, 24, 36 months down the road. But it's hard to have that crystal ball and say, oh yeah, I think, because no one saw the pandemic, coming. And, at that time I was in a coastal community that was still trying to climb out from under Hurricane Florence. And then you get hit with a pandemic and it's like, and the forecast then was the sky's going to fall, sales tax are going to disappear. We all budgeted it that way. And then sales tax boomed. So, it's hard to, we do the best we can to try to forecast and tweak it along the way.
We prefer for you to err on this side than the other one, for sure.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Tufano.
Yes, Teresa, thank you. How do we justify to the public that all of our tax revenue is going up? And this is just an educational question for the public. Yet our deficit is running higher than last year. So how does that work?
Well, that for the deficit with the month of July is always just a timing issue.
Correct.
Depending on if there are debt payments due and how revenues have come in, because, when you're looking at the comparison of this year to last year in the general fund, it looks like, oh my gosh. But then last year, when it was 21 compared to 20, in July of 20, we had a $3.42 million deficit.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's all timing as when annual things are due, payments are made, and then revenues. And of course, 2 months worth of our main revenues being sales tax, occupancy tax, and those things go back into the prior year. So we won't receive the first sales tax payment for FY '23 will be in September. July and August are actually May and June sales tax. So we accrue those back into the prior year.
Very good. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any further questions or comments for Ms. Fulton? Hearing none, thank you. Another excellent report. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Move on to item 9C, consider authorizing staff to negotiate design build contract for Fire Station 3. Bring up my fellow South Mech Saber, Rob Kinnenberg.
Did they win Friday? I've been a little busy. First of all, let me apologize for my casual attire. It's been a day among weeks today and this weekend. So Fire Station 3, we're getting there. So we come before you tonight to consider the award or approval to negotiate a contract with Samet ADW for pre-construction services for Fire Station number 3. With us tonight is Jonathan Best. He is going to shepherd us through the pre-construction contract negotiation process, if you concur. Just as a recap, September last year, we put out our first RFQ for Fire Station number 3. We had to do a backup and sent it back out again for a second time. We were not up to speed on the latest state regulations for doing a design build RFP. We said we'd take any kind of construction delivery method. Once we saw what was out there, we had to refine it for a design build versus a design bid build, which is typical for municipalities. So we netted 10 proposals. Our review team, which consisted of Becky, CJ, Susan, Deputy Chief Kent Davis, 3 captains with the fire department, and myself. We vetted those 10 proposals, and we cut the list to 4, including in alphabetical order, Bobbitt Construction, DR Reynolds with Pinnacle Architecture, and Samet with ADW Architecture. Also, we chose Stewart Cooper Newell with Randolph Construction, but they withdrew from the process when we got to round 2 of the interviews. We conducted site visits in Greensboro, Concord, and Monroe at sites chosen by the candidate firms. We found vast differences in how each of the 3 do business, from very simplified older delivery methods to very modern, very inclusive, very informative delivery methods. We saw major differences in the approach to project management that each take, to the design, the construction management, the oversight, the way subcontractors were vetted and selected, different approaches to how each finalist identifies the most appropriate subcontractors, how they do cost estimation, material selection, warehousing, and overall scheduling. We also saw big differences in citizen and community engagement and the amount of information they provide to key stakeholders. So after we weighed all that, our team was unanimous in selecting Samet ADW for this project, given your concurrence. The team, ADW is the preeminent fire station design firm in the Southeast. I think the presentation that was accompanied the agenda talks about 140 projects. Keith Carolyn, who is the lead for fire station construction, has more than 40 projects under his belt, including at least a dozen in Charlotte. Samet is fairly new, or not new, but new to the fire station construction business. I think Jonathan said they've been in business 60 years, family owned. based in Raleigh, but they have a strong presence here in Charlotte. And Chris Knight he says he lives here in Matthews, but his kids go to Elizabeth Lane, so I guess we'll give him credit. Lives in Matthews, and our selected superintendent, Jennifer Price, lives in Mint Hill. So we are certain to get to know these people very closely. Biggest thing, we feel that this council, it's important to them that we provide opportunities for jobs and work. Our original proposal included a 10% women, small business, and minority participation. Summit projects at least a 25% participation. They finished Greensboro Station 56, and I think, Jonathan, you were at 35%, 56%. So there will be lots of opportunities for those who have not had opportunities to participate in municipal construction through this project. Should you let us move ahead with Summit and ADW. I'll entertain any questions you may have, or Jonathan's here for any questions on the process.
I have a comment and a couple questions. First of all, thank you for the excellent job of vetting these 10 different firms. We appreciate that. We know that it was done well. For the benefit of the public and a little bit for me, can you review the difference again between design build and design bid build, that process? In design, and you can jump in here, Mr. Urban, anywhere you want to. In typical municipal construction, design, bid, build, the town would hire an architect. The architect would do all of the construction design the building, design the site work. It would be permit ready package in our hands. And we would decide A, to either move forward, or B, to shelve it. We would not yet know the price. That package would then go out to bid by contractors who would build the finished product. So design, bid, build. In design build, we are hiring Summit with ADW on board. Our contract would be with Summit to deliver this building. The process moves faster. The process is more integrated in terms of participation by the town in terms of what we want as we go through the design phase. It's possible that we could issue a notice to proceed for site work before we have the architectural plans of the building finished. There is constant estimation of the cost, both value engineering and desired elements. We've already heard from the town's environmental impact committee about all the neat green things we can put in this building, but that's a decision we have to make through the process. Summit also, one of their key aspects was participation and engagement with the public. This is going to be a public facility. We're going to live in it, but this is a public building. So what do they want? Do they want a community room? What do they want aesthetically? So all that is incorporated as we start designing this building. Our goal is to be in this building by July 2024. That's our goal. Ambitious.
Ambitious. I'm on a timeline.
So you mentioned it briefly. That was my second question. The aspect of community engagement, and in particular with our environmental advisory committee, making the suggestions for the many green things that they suggested. That would all be considered as part of the process.
Correct. Those will be provided to us as options as we go through the process.
Fantastic. Other questions or comments? Mr. Tufano.
Yes, could you bring up the auxiliary document, please? That was in the budget, in the agenda. Thank you. And go down to, I think maybe the third or fourth page. Down to where the keep going, probably keep going. I guess it was more than that. Keep going. It's where there, one more, right after that one, right? One more. That. Okay. So this was a sample document, of course, it was dated 2013. What do we have for our project that's similar to this? Is it too early to have that?
We don't have any of that yet.
Okay. When do you anticipate having something like that?
Jonathan?
Good evening.
Hi.
So if you go down to the next slide, we use this tool called Power BI. And what Power BI is, it pulls, we have 6 offices all across the Southeast. We're able to pull data with real
I'm sorry,
time.
sir. Could you speak up a little bit? Thank you. Or
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Can you
Thank
hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So we use a tool called Power BI. And what Power BI does is data analytics. It pulls data from all 6 of our offices. So up to the minute, we're able to pull in the data. So once we are authorized to proceed, we'll be able to get you guys a control budget instantly. And then let's just say, for example, we say this is going to be a block building. We can do it based off of that, or if it's going to be a wood frame building. So we'll be able to get it pretty quick once we know some very simple parameters, which is the square footage, the heights, how many bays, and things like that.
And when do you anticipate getting those basic parameters?
Once we get authorized to move forward and get a
Okay.
contract negotiated.
So you're saying perhaps by this time next month, you may have what would have been equivalent to that sheet that I was bringing up?
Yes, so with Power BI, we can. So basically what happened is we just finished Fire Station 56 in Greensboro with the same designer. We have that data. So we'll be able to pull from that project and also Fire Station 7. So we'll be able to pull from those projects and really dive into the numbers and everything.
And when you pull down those numbers, those are in today's dollars.
Those are in today's dollars. Yes, sir.
Okay, so what are you putting into your estimates for inflation over the next till 2024?
We usually like to carry, that's why with the current market conditions, we like to do things where we can minimize escalation to maybe around 5 or 6%. We own 6,000 acres of land in the Southeast. We own warehouses. We're able to purchase material early. That's why you do the design build method. We can release packages early, store it. We have the financial capability to purchase it, store it, have it on site for when we need it. We'll also be able to release site, structure, concrete, and MEPs, those long lead time items that are costing a lot. We're seeing anywhere from 56 to 60 weeks on things like gear and units. We're able to purchase those early and store them and have them ready so we can minimize the escalation.
And I'm assuming you would adjust your estimates accordingly over time and make us aware of that.
Yes.
correct?
So basically we'll have a conceptual phase, which is initial. Then we'll go into schematic design phase, design development step phase, and construction document phase. By the time we get to DD, 90% of the time within 1 to 2% of the final cost.
Wonderful. And that's usually how many months after we authorize you?
I think we have a 6-month design period on this one. So that would be anywhere 3 to 4 months.
Okay, so by the end of the year, end of this year, we should have a really good idea of what this is going to cost us.
Yes, sir. That is, we
Okay.
keep our fingers on the pulse of the current market, and we understand a lot of contractors are and people on TV are painting doomsdays. But with Power BI, just some of our in-house resources and our relationship with the subcontractor markets, just one direction. We're actually headquartered in Greensboro, so we have a pretty good pulse of Greensboro, Charlotte, Raleigh, Savannah, Charleston, Wilmington. So we're able to look at those different markets and really pull and understand what costs are going to be.
Well, I don't know if one commissioner can ask this, but can we have that estimate sheet this time next month?
I would say we can have it a very conceptual phase. We can. We'll have a lot of escalation and a lot of contingency for design and construction. But yeah, we could get you some next month.
Thank you.
Mr. Urban.
I'd be very cautious. Maybe that debate about releasing information too soon, because pre-construction will be very nebulous.
Yes, sir.
And then it'll start fine tuning. So I get Commissioner Tufano's point, and maybe you have a range. But what I don't want to get into is, well, you said back here under section division 13, it was going to be X. Now we're in December and it says Y. What's the difference? So
what we'll have Commissioner Urban is,
I'm sorry.
I'll answer his question. Yeah, first, sorry. What we'll have Commissioner Urban is what they're saying today. For example, drywall and metal studs.
Oh yeah, no, I understand. You don't have to explain it. What I'm just saying is that if you release data next month, for example, for pre-construction, I don't want to be taking, I get this all the time. They come back to me in December and go, but you said it was going to be this. And we got to realize that there's going to be escalation, de-escalation through this process.
That's where we have a design contingency,
Correct.
construction,
And
and
our
escalation.
our contingency is what are we using?
That's something we'll have to negotiate once we, and so what'll happen is we'll negotiate it, based off our architects and what we're seeing, and we'll say, hey, we suggest at SD level, maybe a 12% design contingency, a 5% construction contingency, and 6% escalation. You'll see those design contingencies start to go down as we get all the way through construction documents. And then what'll happen is we'll probably carry a 5 to 6% escalation based off of the current market.
Yeah, that's precisely why I asked the question about over the next 6 months. I know your continuous SD, CD, and DD, and I know that those numbers will change, but it'll give us an idea right up front about approximately what it's going to be.
Yep.
Now, these are just construction costs, right, Chief? These are not, this is not total cost, a turnkey cost of the facility, correct?
No, there's FF&E that has to be figured in. We have a pretty good idea what that will cost. Similarly to Jonathan's warehousing, we will purchase that ahead of time, warehouse it so that it's ready for install whenever the project is ready for install. Just a caution on timing. We're mid-August. We've got to get through Labor Day. We hope to, we won't get to the contract till September. So asking for an estimate of cost by this time next month is a little tight. We won't even, we have to bring the contract back to you for approval before we can give you some hard numbers. Correct? Okay, we're close.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
I'm going to go ahead and disagree with Commissioner Tofano. I don't want to put a time constraint and make this harder than it needs to be. I don't think we should say by this time next month. I think when it's ready, it'll be ready. So that's one out of 7 saying that. I just don't want one person dictating that and putting extra pressure on the process. I'd love to hear what anyone else has to say.
Are there any further comments, questions, or motions?
One thing I do want to point out that we had to clarify for some folks in the viewing audience, the illustrations that are in the handout are simply illustrative. They are not, we just want to make sure 10 to 12,000 would fit on the site. And we asked the 3 finalists to give us their concept of our needs from what we gave them in the RFQ. So that's, yeah, if you click down a little bit further, Jay, I think. There.
21.
There we go.
22.
And while they're looking, we saw some that were spot on, at least in my mind, and I'm just one, but I am the fire chief. Spot on. One, we wanted to know where the drive-through was, and ADW's is pretty close. So.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we approve or recommend council approves moving ahead with the contract negotiations with Samet/ADW for pre-construction services.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
One of the next item, consider financing for the rescue truck.
This fire chief is costing a lot of money. All of a sudden, no, I'm just kidding. I swear it was on a timeline. What you have before you is a proposal for the financing of the department rescue truck that was approved approved the purchase on February 22nd, 2021, for a total financed amount not to exceed $800,000. The truck is now in its final stages of production, and it was on grand display in Raleigh a couple of weeks ago for everybody in the state to ooh and ah and sit on it and open the doors, and big sign in the front window that says on display courtesy of Matthews Fire Department Chief Rob Kinneberg. I really hate that you all missed all that, but I know all these things from personal experience in the past, how all that works. And fire chiefs, they need that, affirmation. So, I love you. I have a special place in my heart for fire chiefs. So we now need to pay for this so that we can actually have it on the streets of the town of Matthews. So we sent out an RFP in July. We received 4 proposals listed for you, and we're coming to you tonight to recommend that you authorize the town manager to enter into an installment financing agreement with Town Bank, as they have offered us, with all other things being constant, they have offered us the lowest interest rate, which would be therefore the lowest cost to the town for the financing and payments of this fire apparatus.
Any comments, questions, or motions?
Comment.
Commissioner Tafano.
I see PNC Bank was the highest.
Yes.
Yes.
I told you would see later what I was talking about.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
I'd like to make a motion to authorize the town manager to enter into an installment financing agreement with Town Bank for the purchase of an E1 Typhoon rescue truck not to exceed $800,000.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, a second by Commissioner Garner. All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, move on to the next item. Consider authorizing full depth reclamation of Keziah Road. CJ O'Neill.
Thanks. Susan walked out on me on that. So we have Keziah Road is a town road. It's a couple years ago when we did the pavement condition survey, it was in, I guess, fair condition, a 66. So not great, but not falling apart. Since that time, we've had a development build adjacent to that road and connecting to it. They have caused a fair amount of damage to it. But they are nearing the end of the large part of the project where they put most of the infrastructure in. They've come to us and asked if we want, instead of them just patching those areas that have fallen apart, is to combine with us, kind of share costs and the cost to just redo the whole road and to get it done right, so that when it's done, it's nice for everybody along the road, not just for the development. I thought that was a good idea. I did go out there, walk the road, and apportioned what I thought was how much damage they had done to the road. I came to roughly a 65-45% share of damage that they did versus what they didn't do. But since it was at a 66 PCI, it wasn't a perfect road when they started. I lowered that a little bit. What their share was, what I thought was fair, to 60-40 split in costs. So what I'm coming to you is asking you allow us to enter an agreement and to reimburse them for 60% of the cost of doing FDR on Keziah Road. And it's the full length of Keziah Road. So the whole road will be new when it's done.
Mr. Tafano.
Is that for both sections of Keziah Road?
It's the whole thing except for the very end, which we just resurfaced maybe 2 years ago.
Because I think it's split there.
No, it's not. So it's only the older section. It's not the one that's in the new neighborhood, the newer neighborhood. That's a different section. That's not part of this.
And that road's in pretty good shape, the other part of it?
It's not contiguous to this.
No,
so
it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last time I looked at it was maybe 3 years ago, and it was, I'd say, in the 80s.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool, would you like to make a motion, sir?
I'll go ahead and make a motion
to give staff permission to enter into an agreement with United Development Group Incorporated to reclaim Keziah Road and reimburse them 60% of the costs to do so.
Thank you, sir. Do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Urban. All in favor? Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you, CJ, but please keep standing there. We need to
All right.
to present, consider awarding contract for drainage study for Old Town.
All right, last but not least, and so I talked to you about the stormwater program and what's going on, what we can and we can't put town funds towards based on our policy. Old Town is kind of a different thing. So it wasn't just this last storm where we've been having issues. It's any rainstorm really that's over, say, a 2-year storm. We've been having issues with structures flooding, with roads flooding. Some of that I think is caused by debris that gets caught in pipes, which you can't do anything about. But I think overall, I think the whole system is a little bit underdesigned for what's there now. What we want to do is to hire an engineering company to come out and take a look at that, evaluate it, and see whether it does meet the current standards. I do want to go ahead and say I do have land in that area, just as an FYI.
What do you foresee as being the end goal after this study comes back?
So the end goal is for them, I think that they will find some issues with that system. They will make recommendations on how to fix that, cost estimates of what needs to be done. And they're also making sure that whatever they recommend doesn't impact downstream properties negatively. So that's one of the issues with upsizing a certain area. If you're at the high point, whatever you do to make that water go through, now you're putting more water downstream. So
Let me
make sure-
rephrase my question. Is
Sure.
the expectation that the town will pay for any upgrades that are needed?
I think it depends on what the results are.
Okay. And how old is the drainage system in that neighborhood?
I don't know. I think most of them were built, the property I built or purchased, the house was built in 46.
Yeah, I think
So
a lot of those are World War II era. Commissioner Urban.
So I want a little more global question. The last series of rain incidents we had Charing Cross had issues, and it may be completely resolved to some degree. Of course, the downtown floods, and we know about Lat's building. There's not only private issues with flooding, but there's flooding in front, going over the double curb and whole 9 yards. So does it make any sense to expand Dewberry's role here to look at some of the more logistical spots, get the 3-for-1 discount? But I mean, I think just to be fair, the folks in Charing Cross are probably going to be emailing us tomorrow about, well, why are you studying this and not studying there? So, and you may have a perfectly logical explanation. Oh, well, the culprit over there was X.
Right.
But at the same vein, the downtown is critical as well, and we know we have problems down here. So I'm lifting that up. If we're taking an opportunity to look at these things, do we need to sort of rip the Band-Aid off and look a little bit more intently at certain other areas that we know are problematic?
So my personal opinion, the Charing Cross, what's going on there was brought upon by not the current property owners, but by previous property owners when they changed how that water flowed. They put obstructions in the area, the fences, they've rerouted the water some. We've made recommendations for them to bring that back into the way it's supposed to be, so that the water's not being directed right at the one person's foundation and instead down the property line, which is where it originally went. If there's still an issue after that, then I would think that we would look at that again.
That one you've gotten some momentum on, some resolutions and some
Right.
strategies. Okay.
Right.
All right.
In downtown, in this area, so I haven't gotten a clear answer from, I've asked a lot of different people. I've heard third person that there's been issues with flooding from the front going into the building, but I haven't had any first person people tell me that it's all been from behind is what I've heard.
Well, okay. So what I can do is I can get you some tenants along there to give you photo documented evidence that it's coming through the front, but they are getting it from they're
Right, they're getting both
in there
sides.
repairing the buildings, the drywall
Okay.
and all, but we know that's a lot purser issue.
Right.
But the front was, I always thought that over the first curb was one thing, but they said, oh no, it came over the second curb and entered the front of the building.
And I guess the other question, and I really should follow this up separately, but do we know, was that just for this storm or has that happened?
Well, and that's the whole thing, but I guess the question is maybe we have enough documented evidence or whatever about our system in here, but I know going back to Gary's project, it's always been an issue. And I guess the question you just raises, if you got Dewberry doing some things, look at the situation and say, well, the next building you build or buildings, you need to do X. I mean, should we not take a little bit more of a proactive stance in that situation? Doesn't mean we're going to be ripping up sidewalks and curb and gutter or anything like that, but while we have them addressing this, just food for thought.
Mr. Garner.
I'm going to echo Commissioner Urban's sentiments, and that I live along John Street, which, as a state road, they have their own set of issues. But I think a more comprehensive approach, maybe we start with this, but somewhere along the way, we have to recognize that from the patterns that you showed, these storms are going to happen more and more frequently. And how do we prepare for that in the future? And a lot of, the houses in my neighborhood, there's no curb and gutter to stormwater. It's all ditches. And so I hope that in the future, in the very near future, we can kind of look at everything holistically and see what we can do, what's needed to prepare for those future storms.
CJ, can I make a recommendation that you maybe table this for one meeting and go back and look at some other areas that you believe are deserving of further study? Because I can imagine, I mean, my property floods with great regularity. I imagine you're going to have hundreds of people in the town saying, hey, my yard flood, why don't you come check my thing out? So I think there needs to be some sort of vetting and real look at it from a professional standpoint, and have you come back and tell us the areas you think rise to this level, because a lot of people in Matthews had flooding during these last storms, and it's probably more than likely due to the fact that it was a 100-year storm more than anything else. But Commissioner Whitley.
Yeah, and I agree with that, Mayor. But I can tell y'all, we're digging into something that's going to cost us some money, because all of these water lines and drain lines, and they're old. They are old, and I mean, you see them busting the short. We got them here, and especially over near my area. And CJ mentioned that twice. I was there when both of those floods couldn't get on the railroad track, and the first one in 14 came up over the cemetery fence. That's how the water was in drain off. I mean, from the creek over the cemetery, and that was almost 15-foot rise from the creek bottom to where it was to come down in the cemetery. But it's gonna cost, and I heard you, Mayor, asking about cost wise. And I think somebody said these are 46 back when they probably come in, but they're old and they're gonna cost. So and I heard y'all asking for more and I agree with that, because once you're gonna do one part, the other part's gonna be flooded out. So especially like when they talking, it's no drainage there. It's just ditches and run. And it's got to run somewhere. But be prepared when he come back with what y'all asking for astronomical number when they do a storm research of what's going to cost time.
Ms. Hall.
If I can interject, CJ, this may actually be a Charlie question, but my understanding of the solicitation of qualifications was that it was specific to the Old Town area. So I'm not sure that we would be able to just add additional projects on, because this firm was vetted for this specific study area in mind. So it could be a matter of, if the board is interested in moving forward with this project, you could go ahead and consider action on this proposal and negotiations with Dewberry. And then if there are additional areas of town, staff could bring that back as a separate recommendation, so that this study is not held up while we're looking at the other areas to potentially move forward with.
I would be okay with that. I think that's a good idea. I know there's a lot of urgency from the folks that live in Old Town to get a study started. Commissioner Tofano.
And first, I want to commend our town manager and CJ for jumping right on this. This was a major event in that area, and thank you. Just thank you very much. Just a general question about our interactions with Charlotte Water. Commissioner Hoover and I visited with a tenant, a resident in Matthews, and where Charlotte Water's right of way was coming through their land, and very poorly graded, and it was all that horrendous rain just came right off of Charlotte Water's right of way right into this two people's yards right in that area, just completely wiped out their facilities. So what interactions do we have with Charlotte Water to say, hey, this is really impacting our residents. Can you properly do the job you were supposed to do to start with? Have you had those kinds of dealings with them before? And if so, what was your outcome?
Yeah, Charlotte Waters, we work hand in hand with Charlotte Mecklenburg, like the Mecklenburg County stormwater system. Charlotte Water, we have a decent relationship with them, but it almost seems adversarial, maybe. Like we'll have to call them 20 times to come out and patch the road where they've put a line in and didn't do a good job. So I wouldn't say it's been great, but we'd be happy to reach out. And if our first contacts with them aren't positive, the response we get, we can always talk to Mecklenburg County, who helps with the permit and saying, look, you're violating this permit. You need to do that. And maybe they'll get a better response.
Well, if it's okay with the town manager, I'd like to work out a schedule sometime where perhaps we can go out and visit that area to see what possibly can be done for these people. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Commissioner Garner.
I'm going to gather my thoughts a little bit before I speak. I think that it is, I appreciate you saying that you have property in the area. I know what I'm going to hear from people who live around me that say that they've been complaining about stormwater for years and why it hasn't been addressed. It'll come back and say, well, you guys like CJ, and so of course you're going to take care of CJ. I think that, CJ knows that I'm going to hear that too. I'm not saying that's the truth, but I am saying I want to acknowledge that that's a conversation I'm going to be having with people who live around me in the very near future. And so what I would like to know, what I would like to discuss is how we're going to make this a bigger discussion and not just awarding a contract for Old Town, because there are people on my side of trade that also have concerns about may not be as loud as the people who live on Main Street, right? May not have that voice in the squeaky wheel, but have needs and concerns, and just don't have the wherewithal to call attention to it. And so I would like to make sure that as we talk about this and move forward with Dewberry, that we're also going to have a plan in place for some other neighborhoods that are in need.
I think that's a valid point, and I have no doubt that there's going to be some other areas that CJ is going to bring forward. I think CJ's been very transparent that he has property in the area, but I heard all the complaints long before I knew that CJ owned any land over there. So it was a pretty loud response, I think, to all of us when the flooding happened.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I said that I really didn't want to do this because I do have property in the area, and I was kind of overridden a little bit.
And I think the concerns in my neighborhood, they date back, right? So it's not just
Sure.
from this flood
No.
previously, but to see action happen so quickly, I want to make sure that we are checking all of the boxes so that we aren't, again, I think I said it earlier, accused of anything, of being self-serving.
Mr. Urban.
And to piggyback on that, I don't want people to think because we're examining these things, I'd rather look at things globally that automatically we're going to fix all this stuff, because the reality is we don't get 20-year, 50-year, 100-year storms all sort of in the same confluence, but it's going to happen. So I think we need to be very cognizant of that. Commissioner Gardner, would you be accepting that we, after make this motion, we turn around and direct staff to either amend that contract or go back out to respected engineers to go ahead and search out these other areas, immediately get staff working on that?
Absolutely. I think this is I do think, yes, it makes sense to work on Old Town Matthews, right? I mean, we saw the effect of this past storm on that area. And I think that we can, at this parallel to that, start looking at the bigger picture and working towards, I don't know what that proposal looks like. I don't know the capacity of Public Works to handle, to handle all of this at once. I want that to be part of the discussion too. I don't want to overwhelm you and bombard you with anything all at once, but.
And can I make a suggestion, or I guess be clear, if what I'm proposing here, and which is what I would propose for other areas, is to see how the system is designed compared to current standards. So even if we did everything, it still would not handle a 100-year storm. It wouldn't handle a 50-year
Oh,
storm.
I agree.
Right. Okay.
No, I
Great.
agree. I mean, that's something we can't do. And like I said, only moving forward can we look at residential development and say you will design to a higher standing. Moving forward with commercial developments, like those 3 major rezonings we're dealing with, you need to meet a higher standard. And that's the only way you can offset that is through adaptation, which if you always did what you always did, you always,
end up with
the Charlie quote. So I'd be supportive of, as soon as we get this motion out of hand, turn around and say, staff, now work on the next tranche, since everybody likes that word, of projects.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, I think that was a motion
Thank
that
you.
we'd like to go ahead and recommend that staff enter into a negotiation with Dewberry Engineers to determine a scope and price for the Old Town Drainage Study as outlined in the memo by CJ O'Neill dated August 17th, 2022.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you, CJ.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go on to 9G. This was added to the agenda earlier. Approve revised resolution for Governor's Highway Safety Grant Program. Ms. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. So this is a time-sensitive request. Back in July, this board approved a resolution associated with a grant that the town receives from the North Carolina Governor's Highway Safety Program. And so the application and the resolution that the board approved referenced a funding amount of $80,407. In finalizing the paperwork to submit to the state for that grant, we realized that we missed an other direct costs line in the amount of $251. And so we want every dollar that we can get. And so we are asking the board to amend that resolution in order to be able to seek reimbursement in the amount of $80,658, which is about a 50-50 match for that program. So it's just amending that prior resolution. And Jay, do you have that document that you can pull up, please? This is the resolution. The board approved this back in July. And so we would just be looking, if you can scroll down. This is the updated number. So your previous document was 8,407, and it's just changing the document to 80,658. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or motions?
The motion would be to approve the amended resolution as proposed.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the amended resolution as proposed.
So the top number is the federal dollar amount and the lower number is the local cash match. So it's a 50-50 grant. So we would be paying the 80,657. We would be receiving the 80,658
We're
in
sucking it to the
reimbursement.
state for a buck.
We
We have a motion by
50.01. Yes.
We'll show you that.
Motion by Commissioner Tofano. It was seconded by Commissioner Whitley. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Thank you for bringing that forward.
Thank you.
Keep all of our I's dotted and T's crossed. All right, we'll move on to the mayor's report. I know that our planning director, Jay Camp, spoke at the most recent chamber event, and I got a lot of positive comments about your talk or So thank you for doing that. We appreciate it. All right, there you go. I have a few mayoral ones you can do if you'd like. I would like to acknowledge Mount Moriah Church, Pastor Whitley's church, that on 8/20, they had their annual Hug a Cop program, which I understand was a great success. I unfortunately was unable to attend this year, but I know a lot of folks did. I think Mayor Pro Tem McCool attended, Commissioner Garner, anybody else in the dais? But Commissioner Whitley, how many police participated this year?
Excuse me, this was the biggest year of police officers showing. My secretary inadvertently put the wrong date on there and had it for next Saturday, but we had to call everybody by phone and tell them that it was a typo. And so everybody showed up but the Mecklenburg County Sheriff, and I'm quite sure they're coming next Saturday. So we sent a letter to them and apologized and told them that it was, but we had about 150 people came through the fellowship with us.
I know many of us attended the most recent swearing in ceremonies and promotion ceremonies at the police department. And this, I think, is another indication of how much this community loves and appreciates their police officers. So thank you to them. And then finally, I want to remind everyone that Matthews Alive is going to be alive again, September 2nd through the 5th. There are some opportunities for those on the dais, if you so wish, to participate. And if you have an interest in that, please reach out to Leanne Moore as far as maybe being on stage for a few of the events. I'm going to be coming back home from Spain, so I may or may not be here on the 2nd. So Mayor Pro Tem, get ready. But hopefully I'll be here, and it's a great festivity, and it's going to be the first time we've had it in 3 years. So we're all looking forward to it. So come enjoy if you can. And that's all I have for the mayor's report. We'll go on to the town attorney's report.
No report, Mayor.
Town manager's report.
Sure, 2 brief items. The first one, I had the privilege of spending a few days with our sister city, St. Maxime, France, last week, and just wanted to convey their deep appreciation for the statue, or the sculpture, I should say, that this town board sent to them. They were joking that when they heard that they were receiving a sculpture, they were anticipating a desk-sized model. So they were more than a little surprised when a 9.5-foot sculpture showed up in their town. But they were absolutely delighted. They spent a lot of time going through the different aspects of the sculpture and how it pays tribute to our sister city relationship and the country and the town. And they are just an absolutely lovely group of people. I can't say enough good things about them and the hospitality that they showed me. Somebody from very far away who barely spoke a word of their language, and we found friendship and fellowship, and it was a wonderful time. They are planning a return journey and haven't set a date yet, but it should be sometime in 2023. So we will look forward to welcoming them to Matthews, hopefully sometime very soon. And they also made some cryptic statements about some type of return gift. So I don't know what that might be or how big it might be. They may want to be showing us up. So I guess stay tuned to see what that might turn out to be.
Statue of Liberty.
Wonderful trip. And finally, our assistant town manager process is almost at a conclusion. We are very excited. We have our selected candidate through the background process, and we'll be working on setting a start date this week. So I expect they will be on board prior to October 1, and we are within a hair's breadth of being able to talk more about who they are and their backgrounds. But safe to say, we are delighted. I think we will be more than fortunate to have them join our team, and I look forward to all of you getting to know them very, very soon. That's all. Thank you very much. So their videographer took some video and sent some pictures. They were trying to get it ready before I left, but they didn't have it ready. So they're going to be sending it to Maureen, and we'll get it up very soon. Thank you.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by the Mayor Pro Tem, second by Commissioner Urban. All in favor? Good night.